Often I'm asked what the difference is between pixels and vectors, or in other words, the difference between working in Adobe Photoshop as opposed to Adobe Illustrator. Well, in Photoshop, you're dealing with pixels, little squares that can contain lots of color information, as opposed to an illustration application such as Illustrator, which describes the artwork in lines or vectors. What I'm going to do here is zoom in on the edge of this bowling ball to show you something that's going to be quite dramatic when I go to Illustrator and show you the same thing. I'm going to, with my zoom tool, I'm going to zoom in on one of these edges here, and as I get closer and closer, you'll notice that we can see more of these jaggedy lines here. These little boxes you're looking at are the actual pixels themselves. These pixels make up the color information of your file, and this is the main reason that Photoshop files are often much larger than Illustrator files, because the computer is describing the artwork by pixels and the location of one pixel next to another pixel. Now let's go ahead and zoom in to Adobe Illustrator, and we're going to do the same thing. So I'm going to grab my zoom tool and I'm going to go to the same exact edge and look at the difference. We have a sharp, crystal clear line, and this is the difference between a vector, which is a mathematically described path, versus pixels. So Illustrator looks at your artwork and says, okay, the angle between this point and this point is this, so I'm going to give you this curve, and that results in a much smaller file size. Now what I'm going to do is hide both of these guys, and I'm going to jump to my desktop and show you. Here is the bowlingball.ai, which stands for Adobe Illustrator. The file size is 1 megabyte. Now let's go ahead and look at the Photoshop. Bowlingball.psd, which is Photoshop document, 3.5 megabytes. You see the difference? Which is why sometimes I design my book covers and things that need to be emailed to people with Illustrator. If I can do the same kind of work with this application, I often do this if I have to send it to a client that way, because the file size is smaller. But, you can always compress your files with a program such as, Suffit or that kind of thing. So once again, the difference between Photoshop and Illustrator is that you can zoom into an Illustrator file forever, literally the size of the galaxy. The line will always be crisp. But the more you zoom into a Photoshop document, the more jaggedy or pixelated it will look, because you're actually looking at the pixel level of the image.